Over the last year, I've been using AI to build a searchable archive of nearly a decade of Recruiting Future conversations. James Whitlock has done the same with over 200 episodes of his Marketing Rules podcast. Across both archives, the same debates keep surfacing year after year. So, is the industry actually making progress, or just having the same conversations in different ways? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Mackie. Mackie began by replacing the resume screen with a fair, structured voice interview that assesses real skills before anyone formally applies. Now that same intelligence is extending across the whole funnel, from the first conversation to the final decision. They recently launched Tomo, an AI interview assistant for hiring managers. The next step towards one connected system that screens, interviews, and gives every candidate a consistent, fair experience at scale. See how the end-to-end picture comes together by going to mackiepeople.com. That's mackiepeople.com. And Mackie is spelled M-A-K-I.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there. Welcome to episode 806 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Over the last year, I've been using AI to develop a searchable archive of the content in every single episode of Recruiting Future. 3 million words from over a decade of unscripted conversations with practitioners and thought leaders across talent acquisition. James Whitlock, host of the Marketing Rules podcast, has been doing the same thing with his own archive of more than 200 episodes over 7 years. Between us, we now have over 1,000 real conversations that we can interrogate for trends. And the picture that emerges is an industry caught in familiar tensions, fighting to prove its strategic value, grappling with AI that's moving faster than anyone could adopt it, and trying to figure out which parts of hiring should stay fundamentally human. So, what do years of real conversations reveal about where talent acquisition actually now stands? In my conversation with James, we compare what our respective archives reveal about TA's shifting identity, the real pace of AI's change, and the tensions the industry keeps returning to. Hi, James, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always great to get invited back.
For people listening who may not know you or your podcast, give us a quick introduction and tell people what you do.
In the day job, I run a marketing agency for the recruitment and HR space. But part of that is also we run the Marketing Rules podcast, which has been going 6-7 years now. We're on to 200 plus kind of episodes. We talk to all kinds of people in the space, from recruitment agency owners, kind of people of influence within the space, people who've just got something interesting to say about recruitment and talent acquisition and talent tech generally, basically. So that's kind of what we do.
One of the things that is really interesting when you have a podcast that's been going as long as yours has, as long as mine has, is you can spot the trends over time in terms of how people are talking. Now, I'll let you sort of talk about this first, and I'll talk about what I've done. But you've kind of used AI to sort of analyze that with your podcast, haven't you?
Yeah. Again, I can't take all the kind of credit for this. You kind of, I think, mentioned that you were looking at something like this, and I thought we would do maybe something similar. So we pumped all of the episodes into AI Engine. We put all of the kind of transcripts in there. We fed it as much information as we could, and we kind of taught it a kind of a taxonomy on how to kind of categorize everything, with the aim of initially just kind of building out an archive of the Marketing Rules podcast, but then with a longer term view of like, well, then over time, people's opinions are going to change, things in the space are changing. We know there are points within the last few years, i.e. COVID, etc., that have changed things, and on the other side of it's a little bit different. So can we use all this data now that we've kind of captured from all these conversations, 200 plus over the last kind of 7 years, to make some meaningful kind of use of this data? I mean, it's great to have all these conversations. It's great to have this content as a marketer. We love all that. But actually, you kind of gave me the kind of impetus to think actually there's more to this, right? And so so we took a couple of months, kind of pumped all this into AI, and now we're able to kind of search the archive, interrogate the archive for all kinds of kind of trends that run up to where we are now, but also start to do a little bit of kind of planning for the future, which is the next stage of where we go. But as of now, we can interrogate the archive and question to say, look, what's happening through tech over this time? How those conversations changed, etc. So that was the kind of process we're kind of been through, and well, now we're continuing to go through. Basically, with every new episode, it just kind of gets continually updated.
Yeah, it's really interesting. For years, I was saying that I wished someone would invent something that would allow me to go and look back through all the episodes of the archive. And I think when I first said it, I was semi-joking. And then obviously as time's passed, that's become approaching reality, and now it is reality. So, I've done exactly the same thing. And it is fascinating to see people's kind of opinions change over time, and really kind of get a steer on how the industry's moving forward, what people have been saying about the future, all of those kind of stuff. So there's so much data there to interrogate, and I'm only really scratching the surface with what I've got at the moment, which is why I thought it'd be great to have this conversation so we could do a little bit of comparison in terms of the things that we've been finding.
Yeah, indeed. It whether it's just for us kind of podcast nerds, to kind of dive into this stuff, but I think for your audience and my audience, right, it really does give this kind of, it can give either you a snapshot or it can give you this kind of longer term view of kind of what's going on. It's become it becomes slightly obsessive, if I'll be honest, to kind of sit there and just kind of interrogate the archive to kind of, because now for actually it's quite powerful, because anything that I'm potentially going to be talking about with any of our customers or anyone now, I can go back into the archive and just say, actually, where were we with this, or what has been going on, or where is this kind of going? So it's actually become quite a really good tool, because it's real life conversations with real experts. It's not AI kind of hallucinating this stuff. It's actual conversations, which I think is probably the most kind of powerful thing about all of this now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you do a survey to sort of get market intelligence or get the temperature of what's going on, that's really a snapshot in time. And I think with something like this, you can actually see what people believe now, how long they've believed it, how that's changed, how reality's caught up with certain things. It is really fascinating. So let's just dive in and look at some of the topics. So what were you sort of had 10 main things that you found. I think we're going to look at a few of them. Tell us, just give us an overview of what you found in the archive.
It's interesting because definitely there's nothing has really stood still, right? There's nothing that we've kind of been able to kind of interrogate, especially when we're looking really at kind of talent acquisition trends. That obviously we can kind of, there are other things that come along, but it's really kind of TA trends that we're looking at in this instance, and nothing we found has really kind of things have definitely moved and changed for the better and or for the worse. So one of the things that we've kind of picked up on is that kind of talent acquisition has moved from this growth engine to a cost center, and then is trying to kind of skew itself back to becoming more strategic again. And again, I think that whether people kind of listened to that and said, "Oh, that's not correct," or this is what we've learned from this is not necessarily my opinion. This is what from the conversations, but definitely the conversations we've had with probably 10, 20 or so, maybe a few more kind of people who have really kind of dug into this. That's the kind of that we see the kind of trajectory, right? That it started as this growth engine as businesses perceiving it like that, and now it's perceived as this kind of cost center, and it's trying to kind of wrench itself back to look a bit more kind of to be almost more seen as more useful within the business. So wanted to be more strategic, wanted to be measured as being less transactional, that it's less, it shouldn't be seen as this kind of in this kind of fragile position within a business that could be let go or should not be let go, and kind of that kind of thing. And yeah, those are the kind of things that we're seeing kind of in point one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because that really mirrors what what I've seen as well. So in the sort of early days of my podcast, talent acquisition was growing. It was all about saving costs for the business. COVID sort of threw everything up in the air. Then a lot of companies were back in that sort of growth mode again. But we kind of very much are in that phase at the moment where almost every conversation I have is about talent acquisition wanting to be more strategic. And there are conversations coming through where that is very much the case, but there are also conversations where it's still aspirational, and a lot of the things around measurement and proving value are really at the forefront of the conversations. And I think that there is a really interesting thing when you look at these archives in terms of the aspiration of what people want and where they are now, and how that gap moves over time. And I think, we are seeing that gap close, but in a lot of cases, there's still a long way to go.
I think that's a kind of almost general consensus across everything that we found when it comes to kind of talent acquisition in our archive, that it mirrors exactly what you've kind of just said. It's trying to kind of move itself back to understanding what its value is within a business and express that within a business. That seemed to have all got kind of quite muddled. And obviously, a few years ago there was these huge kind of layoffs, and we spoke to guests who were kind of going through that at the time. And obviously the perception of the people within TA and obviously businesses was this kind of, what is the value of this? What's it adding to the business beyond, recruiting people? So I think the conversation has now moved. So we're seeing that, how do we prove that value we add that isn't just putting bums on seats? It's everything else. It's how are we kind of building the long-term future of the business that we are working within, and how do we help them understand that? How do we speak that language better? Those are the kind of, again, the conversations that we've definitely, some of the kind of, when you dive a bit deeper into the topics that are coming up within this cost center versus kind of strategic kind of thing with TA at the moment.
Let's move on to the next one. What was the next kind of biggest thing that came out of your archive?
Well, it's everyone's favorite. It's kind of this is AI, right? And to kind of caveat that, I actually resisted doing a huge amount of kind of like AI discussions right at the start, but then you just couldn't get away from it. A lot of it just basically just kind of came. It just filtered into everything. Every conversation you ended up having, there was some touch point. And I guess that's possibly a reflection on my views on it, but also a reflection then of the guests' views, that it was starting to just become ubiquitous within everything. So this AI discussion kind of shifted from really this excitement about it through now to more around the kind of governance on it, which I guess is a very kind of obvious trend that it was going to go through. But definitely the guests that we've been speaking to, and people will know the likes of kind of Martin Redstone, and probably, again, that's where this kind of conversation kind of gets to now. It's definitely around, it's here. How do we now manage it, control it? It's not going away. It's adding something. We're not necessarily kind of sure which side of the fence do we sit on. Are we still trying to kind of, we're not going to fight it, so we need to make sure that it works for our business and we govern it. We have to have that oversight, through to a bit of, I'm still a bit kind of concerned about the bias and all those kind of things. So I guess it's a situation that, even though they're talking about governance, I think there's still a little kind of misunderstanding and not really people got their heads around it yet within kind of talent acquisition.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I really want to do a kind of a report or a graph that looks about how AI has kind of been spoken about over time in my podcast, because it's fascinating. I think the first mention was like back in 2016, where someone made a ridiculously accurate prediction about scheduling tools and things like that. But then no one mentions it after that for a couple of years. Then there's this big debate about, is AI real? And it's because a lot of things that in retrospect we're looking at are just algorithmic search and things like that were being called AI. So there's this big debate about, is AI actually, this isn't AI, it's just a search engine. And then the generative AI kind of explodes everything. And it's interesting to watch that go from sort of hype to experimentation to, as you say, looking at the serious consequences of this. What are the risks? And I think what I'm also seeing develop is there is an increase, and I think it's related to that governance point. It's an increased conversation about trust and trust with candidates. And I think the candidates are the people who are driving that. And it's interesting to see how it plays out. But still, still not that many sophisticated use cases, if I'm honest. I have a few, and I have more and more, and I'm seeing people doing some amazing things, but it's not as widespread perhaps as people feel it is, or certainly as it should be. So it's kind of a much slower evolution than was predicted a few years ago, but it's still going quicker than anything else we've seen.
Agreed. And it kind of feeds into the previous point around, again, TA proving their value. If they can kind of get to grips with this and be the kind of owners of the AI for their part of the business, and feed that upwards and talk that language, again, I think it can kind of, again, prove their value to a certain point, which, I mean, and it slightly touches upon, which isn't one of the main points, but, there's other things around kind of curiosity and adaptability of talent acquisition as well, to be able to maneuver fast enough and keep pace with these kinds of changes are definitely valuable skills for for recruiters and people within talent acquisition, as opposed to massive amounts of expertise. In the end, it's around this kind of adaptability. TAs, the whole process with AI is being kind of shaken up, maybe not as fast as we thought, but it's not going anywhere. So the ability to adapt to that, again, is something that we kind of picked up upon as well, as being more adaptable, as opposed to being great recruiters, great, but that some of that adaptability is probably one of the kind of the skill sets that a modern TA person needs, and that will feed into the use of AI and technology, kind of, et cetera, as well.
I think that's a stunning point, actually, because I think that sort of that adaptability versus expertise is kind of critical. And I think back to literally just sort of 2 years ago, where people were coming on the show demanding that everyone had to be an absolute expert in prompt engineering. Remember prompt engineering? That was the thing. We were going to learn prompt engineering. You have to learn prompt engineering. And now you just tell Claude what you want it to do and it does it. Basically. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that, and understanding what's going on and all that stuff is really important. But as you say, it's kind of more important to sort of keep up to date with what's possible and thinking about the implications than sometimes diving into the very specifics, because they just change literally on a weekly basis at the moment, which is extraordinary. So yeah, it is a particular type of mindset that you have to be able to deal with this, I think.
And if it feeds back into the first point around kind of being able to kind of add value, I guess a lot of these, again, not a direct point, but the threat of technology to a talent acquisition's kind of usability within a business and their skill sets, there's definitely kind of that has kind of changed, and either from going from being very wary of this kind of new technology to trying to then evaluate it better and use it more intelligently, and not necessarily see it as the threat that it was originally kind of positioned as. We definitely see these conversations within they're not one of the main kind of 10 as we've picked up, but they're conversations that I definitely know I've had around that technology is great, we're excited about it, actually it's going to be doing our job for us, actually no, we're going to need to adapt and change and work with it kind of scenarios.
I'm reminded of this is me sounding very old, but back in the day, probably about the year 2000, I was working for a recruitment marketing agency. We kind of had an early version of what would turn into an ATS, and I remember sitting down talking to a TA team about this, and they didn't want to know, because basically this ATS would take away all the administrators' jobs, so they didn't want to buy it because of that. So it's kind of interesting, and obviously things evolved and things were different, but it's a really difficult time. It's a really interesting time, and tracking what people are saying about this and the sentiment is also interesting as well, because I think we could probably if we look back, see shifts in sentiment as well, from everyone being really excited to people being wary, to talking about governance, to being cautiously excited, to, you know what I mean? I think there's probably an interesting sort of trend line that we could put around that when it came to AI as well. Skepticism, excitement, skepticism, fear, all those sort of things. Support for this podcast comes from Pebble. I know that many of you listening hire internationally, and you'll be all too familiar with the paperwork and red tape that can really slow things down. That is what Pebble is designed to fix. Pebble makes global hiring simple through embedded compliance and AI-driven workflows. The Pebble platform takes the delays and guesswork out of going global, so founders and HR leaders can move fast without adding risk. Hiring abroad can take months when you do it on your own. With Pebble, you can hire in over 185 countries in minutes and have your new hire onboarded by Monday. Most companies treat compliance as something to manage around. By building a decade of expertise directly into the platform, Pebble removes the fear of mistakes and the dreaded regulatory blind spots. Instead of juggling separate tools for contracts, payrolls, benefits, and compliance, Pebble brings everything together in a single platform that integrates with the tools that teams already use. It also reduces the redundant tasks and manual processes that can cause errors and delays in hiring. The result is a global team that's actually set up to succeed, with accurate pay, real benefits, and the support they need to thrive wherever they are. The bottom line is anywhere is possible with Pebble. With global hiring simplified, founders and HR leaders can spend their time focusing on what and where comes next for their business. There's also a special offer for recruiting future podcast listeners. Pebble is normally $399 a month per employee. Already a no-brainer for what you get, but right now there's a limited time offer on their site that makes it even easier to get started. Go to highpebble.ai before it's gone. That's pebble.ai. Terms and conditions apply. Let's move on to the next one because it's definitely related to this.
So this next one is, I suppose, close to my heart, being a marketeer, and it's kind of TA quietly becoming a marketing function. And again, just to kind of reiterate, this is where the kind of the data within the podcast is. I'm not sure I necessarily believe or agree with this necessarily myself, but from the conversations we've had, that's the trend that we're seeing. And I suppose it's right in a certain fact that, you know, TA is no longer necessarily seen to just be kind of recruiters and vacancy fillers. There's a whole other area around, are they the arbiters of employer branding? Are they the arbiters of EVP? There's social strategies to kind of around the TA infrastructure, and you know the way they have to understand how content works online and the types of content they've kind of put out there. We haven't really dug into this enough to know that if it is the role of the people within talent acquisition, or if it's recruitment marketing, or if it's someone else, or if it's a combination of across all of these kind of different things, whether it actually is their job. You know, that's what, but it does, the conversation we had definitely is, there's more of a marketing kind of slant and skill set needed to be, if you're going to be in this space now, definitely.
I think that's really interesting. And I'm just kind of struck by all of the different roles that TA teams are supposed to be fulfilling, as you say, you know, employer branding, recruitment marketing, actually filling jobs, but also being technical experts and all this sort of stuff. So it is a very difficult kind of position to be in. I think the marketing thing's interesting. My background's in recruitment marketing a million years ago. That's kind of how I started off. And it's interesting to kind of track over time what's happened. In some ways, I think things have been a little quiet about recruitment marketing very recently. However, I can really see that it is going to have to bounce back, because I think what's happening at the moment is people are using AI to shortcut lots of things, you know, lots of copywriting, lots of stuff like that. And we are living in a world where everything is just starting to look and sound identical. And I think that, you know, the marketing skills around understanding your audience and standing out and getting the right messages out there are going to be critical in a world drowning under AI slop.
To touch point with some of the other ones, and it kind of with other points that we've kind of made, it's interesting, you know, that would 20 years ago would a a person in TA expected to understand even some of the kind of like the basics around kind of recruitment marketing, like costs per click and costs per application and retargeting and things, and omni-channel kind of engagement. I don't think so, right? I mean, they had a quite a kind of, it was slightly more boring role. I don't know, but they definitely didn't have that pressure on them to be kind of the arbiters and managers of all this stuff, as well as trying to kind of put bums on seats, understand if that person's right for the role, find the right person, interview the right person, all of this kind of stuff, which again, I know technology has parts to play in this now, but again, it probably comes down to this, people in TA having to prove their value and their worth a bit more. So they have to understand some of this stuff that they are getting kind of their cost per application could be technically attached to, the work that they're doing elsewhere and things like that, so it's interesting. And I'm not sure I agree with that they should be marketeers. I think it's a very different kind of skill set and role. And I feel that there are people within kind of talent acquisition that do it very well, and you can see the ones that do it very well. But it's not actually the fault of the ones that don't do it well. It's kind of they shouldn't be kind of like almost left behind, because actually I don't think it should be their role. As I said, the conversation we have, say it's moving in that direction, we've got nothing to say whether it should or shouldn't be the direction it's heading, but it does seem to be the direction.
Certainly what I've noticed was, if you go back 10, 15 years ago, this stuff would have automatically gone to a recruitment marketing agency. And over that time, gradually more and more of it has kind of come in-house. It's sort of got in waves. And I think, there is an interesting discussion around that, and also around expertise, because as I said earlier, if you have a team that's supposed to be doing all these different things, what kind of expertise do you need to do that? So it's a really interesting one. Time for one more. Give us another one that.
So this is around this is slightly contrary to everything we've just discussed, is around that. So that human connection has become kind of more valuable as technology has increased. And I guess this is people might say, well, that's kind of obvious, but it feels like there's a kind of a shift, that there is certain points within kind of the recruitment and talent acquisition process that are almost ring-fenced now, right? That this is a bit that technology shouldn't be kind of involved in, and actually there is this need for this kind of human connection is the bit that's going to really kind of make you kind of stand out from the crowd, because it's not all completely automated, etc. So we mentioned that this kind of this reliance on a lot of kind of automated kind of processes, but there's that trust element involved in whether that's actually doing the right thing. So again, that's kind of leaning into this human connection. I think people are starting to feel that they want humans to make some of those judgments over the kind of technologies. Again, that's definitely kind of come up in conversation, and especially around the interview process as well. With this definitely came up on numerous occasions, that's a person-to-person process and not a technology kind of process. Things around that are definitely in the archive. And
this kind of plays into everything that we've spoken about so far. So there is that huge candidate trust issue at the moment. There's the AI and there's the automation. And it's definitely something that's been coming across in my podcast as well, as some cutting edge teams who are really doing some amazing things with AI and automation. This is their debate. It's like, what should be automated, what shouldn't be automated. And the debate's gone beyond what can we automate to what should we automate. And that's interesting. I think that there is an interesting sort of debate coming, or I'm starting to see around this, because absolutely, as you say, it's about ring fencing the bits that are still fundamentally human. But I also think it's trying to decide what those bits actually are, because there are often, there might be things that people take for granted or like doing that actually an AI can do better. And actually a lot of the companies that I've spoken to who have automated some of the interview process have done it so the humans can have better conversations when they kind of get involved. So, and the candidates are really like that, because they've been able to get an element of transparency, have a great conversation with the human. So I think it's there's the whole thing about judgment as well, human judgment being really important, but humans are also biased. And yeah, I think this is to me is the really interesting debate for the next 2 years or so, although the speed things are going, maybe the next 2 months or so. It's like, what is it that should remain human and what shouldn't? And I don't think it's always going to fall the way that people think it will.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, one of the interesting points that I kind of gleaned out from a couple of the conversations was that those moments of human interaction are becoming more and more kind of valuable. Wherever that is in the process, that's becoming kind of. And with regards to that kind of judgment point, we had a couple of kind of guests definitely speak around that candidates just weren't ready to trust AI enough. They still trust a potentially biased human over a biased AI. You know what I mean? So I think that whether it was making a actually correct and fair decision or not wasn't necessarily the thing that was they were concerned about. It was just still this kind of overcoming this kind of trust issue, which I think is from outside influences on talent acquisition.
I think it's really interesting because I think that's so accurate at the moment, and I think also from a candidate perspective, there is a perception that AI is far more pervasive than it actually is at the moment. It's like, a lot of the time, the problems that you're having are because of outdated processes or overwhelmed recruiters or whatever it is. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But yeah, fascinating. I mean, any thoughts on the future? Where do you think we might be going? What would we be expected to sort of talking about if we were to do this again in a year's time with the guest that we've got coming up?
I don't know if it's going to. I think you'll be talking about this kind of similar stuff for a few years yet, right? My feeling is, and if you take the past as kind of as a trend, I mean, we had these similar discussions, especially around something like AI and new technologies around the internet, around job boards, and I think. You're right. I think that there's a learning process we're still going through with AI specifically that hasn't come to a conclusion yet, and I don't think will within the next kind of year or so because it's moving too fast. And I think that I think things are around the pressures on TA to prove their value, to prove that they can do the marketing or shouldn't be doing the marketing. I think that piece that will be what I would like to see shift. Right, I'd like to see the fact that kind of TA is given its due within a business at those kind of points, and hopefully that has started to shift in the next, and we're starting to see a little bit of it. The recruitment within talent acquisition seems to have kind of plateaued and going back up again. So it feels like there is a bit of a shift happening there, and hopefully that continues. And again, also just for the betterment of TA, I hope they're able to become way more embedded and really prove it within those organizations what they actually do. Hopefully that's a trend I would like to see. And I said, we're seeing the edge of it. The technology stuff, it's going to happen. We can't kind of avoid it. So but it probably isn't, like you said, it's not going to be as pervasive as it probably is perceived to be. So yeah, so I think it's the attitude around what TA does and should be doing.
That's absolutely spot on. Interested to see it kind of pan out with the conversations that we'll have over the next few months. So James, thank you very much for talking to me, and look forward to comparing notes again sometime soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Matt.
My thanks to James. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.